Well, once again, we got the premier program for Sunday afternoon. We call it the Christian Court, and we're glad that you can join us. There's a term that's been coming into culture, the American culture and worldwide culture, and the term is called woke, WOKE. And basically, what it means is an awareness of social inequalities such as sexism. Sadly enough, some Christian conservatives are saying that Jesus is actually too woke for them. Just to cut to the chase here, we know Jesus showed a lot of love, and we know Jesus used righteous indignation when necessary, especially with the Pharisees.
Mhm.
But how would you answer this question? Is Jesus too woke?
Yeah, I actually had to look this up after hearing the question. This is due to some comments made by Russell Moore, who's the editor in chief of Christianity Today. And so I want to read what he said because this is one of those things that a public figure has said that sparks a national conversation. And different people will use that and as talking points or for their agenda. So I think this whole issue is somewhat being blown out of proportion. But let's start with what Russell Moore said. Quote, multiple pastors tell me essentially the same story about quoting the Sermon on the Mount, parenthetically in their preaching, turn the other cheek, and have someone come up afterwards to say, where did you get those liberal talking points? When the pastor would say, I'm really quoting Jesus Christ, the response would be, yes, but that doesn't work anymore. That's weak. And he added, when we get to the point where the teachings of Jesus himself are seen as subversive to us, then we're in a crisis. End quote. So this idea has gone out into the social media where, as I say, I think it's blown way out of proportion. First of all, this is just one man's anecdotal story. We haven't talked to these Christians. What do they mean by that? What is their background? What is their thinking? All we have is this little story that is broken out into, oh, conservative Christians think Jesus is too woke. I doubt that there's a large majority of Christians who are rejecting the teachings of Christ that come right out of the Bible because it sounds too liberal. Now, maybe there's a small number, maybe it's just these few who have talked to Russell Moore, but I think the whole thing is being blown up. Now, let me address the question, is Jesus too woke? First of all, there's a question of what does woke mean? Ask different people, you'll get different answers. This idea of wokeness is being used by different people in different ways. So we got to be careful about that. But there is a certain way that we're being cautioned that it's dangerous. And I would agree, there's a way that woke is being used that is dangerous. And it's not just an awareness of inequalities, but an attempt to correct inequalities by creating more inequalities. That's like saying, if I have a bunch of holes in the bottom of my boat on the left side, I should make the same number of holes on the right side, and that's going to improve things. It actually doesn't work, but it's a way to manipulate and control people by saying, you're not woke enough, or whatever it is. So there is a danger from a certain kind of wokeism or way it's being used that we need to be on the lookout for. But as far as Jesus, he is the perfect example. He is God in the flesh, and he always did the right thing. So his example in life is one that we can follow. Jesus is the perfect exemplar of human behavior. It says in 1 John 2:6, whoever says he abides in him ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. So when we see the principles that he lived by, we should follow them. Jesus even says to his disciples, I have given you an example that you should also do just as I have done to you. John 13. That's when he washed their feet. Now, someone might say that's a narrow application, but I think it's safe to expand that to say, in the way that Jesus lived, we follow also. As Peter said, Jesus left us an example so that you might follow in his steps, 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 21. So we take after Jesus. We are the followers of disciples of Jesus. So if Jesus is too anything for you, too woke or not woke enough, too kind, too harsh, too good, too judgy, too forgiving, too humble, whatever you put under Jesus is too X, you're just rejecting him and his teachings. To say, well, no, I'm not always going to love my neighbor, that doesn't work anymore, that's weak, is to reject the example that Jesus gave and his teachings. And so you might be a conservative, but you are not a Christian. Jesus said, whoever denies me before men, I will deny before my Father in heaven. Now, there really are inequalities like sexism. Jesus acknowledged this too. He said, you'll always have the poor with you. He didn't say, you should go out and fix this problem. Inequalities are going to always exist until the eternal state. So Jesus recognized that, and there's something we live with. But the more people who live by the principles that Jesus taught, if we were to all walk in the way that he walked, we would have the least amount of inequalities and the best outcome for our society. So that's my answer. No, Jesus is not too woke or not woke enough. He is exactly the right amount of woke by whatever definition you choose.
There actually are some that do take that position, which is really bizarre. Very interesting. Let's bring Jay on. Is Jesus too woke?
I wondered if that was referring to whether Jesus read the Awake magazine or not. But no, it doesn't. I guess it doesn't mean that at all.